wanted to cover today is we actually just wanted to, I think there's a lot of talks about blockchain, and I've certainly been a lot of talks, I know Kirsten has as well, where we talk about blockchain, but for people who are actually building in this space, I think it's actually really nice to just show what's really happening in blockchain. I'm going to talk about Flight Plan, which is the product that we've been building, which is live, and we've got a small set of users that we're piloting, including Josh and Zara. Okay, so you've seen the kind of what does it look like from a user perspective, but this is what Zara and Josh would see, like this is in the design mode. So they can see that there's that architecture diagram, and there are those screen flows. So they're all connected to the Ethereum blockchain. Mainly this one where we're actually inputting in. It gives a bit of guidance as well about what kind of information and what research have we found actually works well on those different pages that the user is going through. So this first page, the home page, Zara can edit anything she wants in there. That probably looks a lot like what we see kind of with front end today. It's probably the more interesting page. So this is actually where you choose what fields are you going to put on the chain. And so we've given people the choice of 3 fields to put on the blockchain. Not 4, not 5, because 3 really focuses people around why they're using blockchain. So one of the things that we found that blockchain needs at the moment is a heap of constraints to really keep us on the rails and make sure that we're really focusing on things that matter. So these can be anything, so they can be text fields or numbers. I'll show you the contract in a sec. But this last field here can be text, or what we found, thanks to doing the crypto cats, is there are some things that we store off the chain, but we store a reference to it, yeah? And just like we have at the kind of protocol and chain levels, we use what we call a hash. So we use a SHA-1 hash in there, and this is a concept from cryptography. And a hash gives us this ability to, if we have the same file, so just say we're talking about one of those fashion designs or the satellite imagery, if we have the real deal, we can actually verify it's the same by producing the hash on the file. We get the same output. But you can't produce the file from a hash. So that's all of the different pages there. In terms of what's happening kind of behind the scenes. So this is, who's seen Etherscan before? Not many people. So Etherscan, there are other Ethereum blockchain explorers. It's like a window into looking at the blockchain without having to be, mucking around at the terminal. And what you can see in here, so this is actually a link to one of the contracts that's running it. I think this is Daisy chain here. And so what you can see here, so this is the contract name, so Flight Plan 1 here. So anyone can go and look at these contracts whenever they want. So it's quite simple what's actually happening on the blockchain. So you can see here we've got 3 input fields. They're those 3 input fields that we have in the front end there. And what we're doing is we're really setting those. Now these are what we call strings, which means they're text field, which is why you can use numbers. You can name them whatever you like as well. But that essentially puts it onto there. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a smart contract that was easy enough for people to read so they could get a bit of an idea, at least in the beginning, before the idea gets really complex, about what was happening behind the scenes. Because I think it's really important to have a bit of that understanding of transparency. Now, if you look at one of the transactions that has gone through here, so this is the hash, that's the unique identifier for that transaction. You can see this is how many block confirmations this one's got, so this is the idea of like how many nodes are there. On Ethereum. It's referring to that contract I was talking around. This is the public key. So I haven't talked much about public keys yet, but we've architected it in a certain way, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we're learning in that space. The actual value of these transactions, so putting that data onto the chain, we didn't exchange any money in doing that, probably can. But we did use gas, which is a transaction cost. You can see it's 0.00000, many zeros, and then 69334 here of ether, which is hardly anything, right? But you'll notice that we didn't have any wallets or any of that kind of stuff, in this user experience, because we really believe that where the market's heading at the moment is more towards, how do we make it kind of free in the beginning for users, especially getting through that onboarding. So a big part of what we do with Flight Plan is really look at what are those emerging design patterns and try to kind of refactor them in so people can just focus on the things that really do matter. And then you can see here what is the actual input data. So it's calling that function you saw before, the set inputs. We've got the three fields there. And this is really hard to read, isn't it? So we just go, that's a little bit easier to read, but you can see we've got the farm here, which is Tulangi. Yeah, so just reading the data off the chain is a little tricky, so we sort all of that stuff out for everybody in the front end. So this one we had a file, and we hashed the file there as well, and we put the file extension so you can, and then that was the ratio. So this one was from Daisy chain.
Actually, just at a very broad, right? What is the problem space from a government's point of view, a farmer's point of view, and a consumer's point of view? And this is just a quick summary and distilled down version of the research. I guess we went back to why build a prototype in the first place? This is the first prototype, we have to be very specific. So why bother? And we figured out it's two reasons. One is we need to communicate and test the concept with farmers, that they understand the value of it, to actually understand which data is important to store on the chain or off the chain, which data is important that we keep permanent and immutable. And the second thing was actually to kind of investigate the feasibility of using open satellite data to prove that we can actually do this. And we basically scavenged around the internet and the webs for different photos of the farm over a specific period of time to kind of infer, okay, there could be some probability of rotation grazing here. So this was a prototype that we had. And again, going back to our two main, motivations for building the prototype in the first place is to communicate this to farmers. So we need a really clear description of what it is. So again, this was actually an onboarding page for farmers. Get started with your farm location. It basically retrieves satellite data based on your location and use it to prove sustainable farming practices. So over here in this case, once the farmer puts in that, which takes them 2 minutes, just an address, what the backend would do is it would actually, so you put in the farm name. So once that's done, the system would actually then put in the stock to land ratio based on the geospatial data and upload that. And it gets submitted onto the chain. Now, a key part of the design was that the farmer is actually not the one that is filling up and putting this onto the blockchain. It was actually us in the short term, which, I guess that's easy to explain it for now without complicating it.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point, which is a lot of the research that these guys were doing was, if anyone knows a farmer or has been out to a farm, the last thing they're doing is got cryptocurrency and a laptop, on the back of their ute, right? So, how could you make it the least amount of information that they needed to do and make it really easy? So just being able to fill out the address and maybe in the beginning it's, actually going out and doing the address, and of course we'll talk about proof of location a bit later, but actually that automated data coming, mocking up how it comes from the actual satellite.
Into the blockchain.
And why is the image included as well? Is that evidence of the stock to land ratio?
Yes. That it's not just someone going, oh yeah, this is a dig. And so everyone can actually check that, okay, this is actually real.
And that'll change over time, right?
Yes,
so how do you
it's
capture,
time-stamped.
But when will the next image be taken, for instance? And then when would it have to be updated on the blockchain?
Exactly. So those are the exact details which we haven't figured out.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's the idea, right? Is that, you know, you really, once you've actually set up the farmer, there's nothing stopping you from, and I guess this is where the smart contract part of it comes through, as you kind of go from like this first prototype to, you know, moving towards that MVP and, you know, seeing how you can connect it with real satellite data rather than kind of faking it in the beginning, to say, well, actually, how can you make it easier for the farmer by just automating the collection of that data, and actually building trust into the fact that, wow, we have that satellite imagery and we can see it over time for these different farms in there, and that data's on the chain.
Update it annually, right? With
Yes.
the smart contract triggering the farmer
Yeah.
will update it.
Yeah.
Or release some extra funding as a result of that. Yeah, so that's a
Actor ecosystem looks like. So you've got, I think we've all thought about kind of supply chain from that consumer perspective, but this prototype's really designed for Bob, the farmer here. You've got the satellite imagery also talking to kind of the public institution there.
I love this, and I want to connect with you afterwards. The reason being is we're trying to get a blockchain centre going in regional New South Wales. We want to help farmers start to create blockchain companies and do ICOs and everything. I think this is a really nice use case to sort of introduce them to, because I think it's something they'll connect with and quite possibly use.
Yeah.
So I'll chat to you later.
Because I'm a designer, I've been in fashion for a bit, I wanted to know how I could reduce waste or make the supply chain more transparent. As well as there's so much exploitation and pollution in the fashion supply chain. So how could we solve that issue? I think for me, it was really important just to understand where I could start, because the issue is so huge. So in the end, we narrowed it down to just one product. At the moment, I'm doing a 3D knitted beanie, and that's my proof of concept. And for me, it's like I know exactly who the producer is, who is actually going to manufacture it. It's a machine, not a person. And I know how much I need for every step of the way. And that helps me sort of minimize fashion waste, which is a huge problem.
So similar to Josh's one, you've got I guess what we found from a lot of the UX research we've done on dApps is that the first page matters a lot in terms of making it really easy and succinct and targeted towards the audience. So this one is all about, you know, this is aimed at the designer. Yeah, so this is, the prototype is centered around the actual designer putting on their designs to be crowdfunded. And so it's all about getting funded by your customers, yeah? And the copy and language is all talking to them about that. And then I might start talking about the fields, but you can add on. So in terms of, you know, what are the fields that we're actually adding to the chain? So in terms of adding any fields to the chain, for you to have any agreement or smart contract, you need that data to be on the chain to be able to have that. So in here you've got, you know, who is the designer? So let's put something on. So maybe it is, you know, Zara in this case. This is really important. So the run. Yeah.
I think lean manufacturing is really important because you only make what is needed and it's on demand. And by knowing exactly how many items that you need to produce, you won't have any waste at all. In terms of, the problem will be like returns and all of those things, but that's something we'll have to solve.
So in this case, we're putting that design onto the chain, and that's kind of the beginning of that proof of concept. And some of the thinking is there are some fashion designers and some manufacturers here in Australia that you know, people who are already well known for doing sustainable practices know of. So we've been talking a bit about who are the kind of approved or trusted kind of public keys that are allowed either into the ecosystem or are people that can kind of verify or vouch for different actors in the ecosystem. So I think this idea of using I guess we're starting to call kind of oracles or trusted kind of verifiers in the community is a good way to kind of begin that ecosystem and only allow people in that are kind of pre-verified. Yeah.
Just in Australia and New Zealand, Woolmark is doing a lot of work to sort of verify, and there are so many farms that are actually doing the right thing, and that's why I chose wool, because you can actually trace it from the farm all the way to the spinners and to the 3D knitting machine. So you don't have to really worry about anything going wrong in that sense.